I'm taking the train with my family. We're going to visit my father's childhood home in East Germany. I've only been to this house a couple times, and the last time was 20 years ago. I remember it being pretty run down, and that it sort of feels like a museum of East German life. Almost as soon as I walk in, I see this instrument hanging on the wall. I can't quite figure out what it is. It has 12 strings. My dad says that this instrument belonged to my grandfather, whom I never knew. I asked my dad how long this thing has been on the wall.
This has been a long time on the wall. I don't know.
That's amazing.
We all agree that I should definitely bring this thing home and try to make a video about it. So now I just have to figure out how to get it back to the US without breaking it. A day has passed. I've been unable to play the instrument in the hotel room because I can't tune it. The tuning pegs won't budge. I've also been trying to identify the instrument. Unfortunately, there's no label on the inside. I tried doing an image search on this, and the first link that came up was to something called a Waldzither, which does look similar, but those usually have 9 strings, not 12. There's a music shop in Berlin that I've been meaning to check out. Maybe they can help me. I learned about this place from an interview with Clark, one of my favorite electronic musicians. Inside, the shop exceeds my wildest expectations. It's packed to the gills with oddball instruments, including many that I've been hoping to make videos about. They even have a bass domra, something I've never seen in real life. I showed the shopkeeper a photo of my instrument, and he says that's called a mandriola, and they used to be quite popular in East Germany. He even has one hanging from the ceiling somewhere. I go back to the hotel room, armed with new information for my research. Of course, the first thing I do is look up mandriola, which brings me to the Wikipedia entry for tricordia, which is the name of the same instrument in Mexico. As entries go, this one's pretty thin, but it does at least tell me how it's tuned. Also, I was able to turn up a bunch of YouTube videos of people playing the instrument, so at least I know what it's supposed to sound like. Okay, it's been a week. We're back in the States. As you can see, the instrument survived its transatlantic ride in the suitcase. It's finally time to tune this thing. I tried using a peg winder on it, but it doesn't work because the little plastic pieces on the tuning machines are too small. So I'm gently using pliers instead. Let's speed through this. Okay, let's try this thing out. I think it sounds pretty nice. It feels kind of strange to be playing this instrument that belonged to a grandfather that I never met. I wonder what he would say if he could see me playing this instrument in America, surrounded by synthesizers. So the first thing I'm going to do is sample it with these original vintage strings. That's work that consists of recording the same note over and over again. Let's fast forward through this. Now that I've got this recorded, I'm going to do a quick noise reduction. I use Isotope RX for this. Next, I'm going to chop up the samples using Reaper's built-in chopping tools. And finally, I've got this script from a guy named Xrame that detects the pitch of all of the notes that I recorded and labels everything according to the pitch. All that's left to do at this point is to export out the samples. And as it happens, since I recently worked on a mandolin sample library, I have a preset I can basically reuse. Here's the finished product. I really love the natural chorus that comes from having 3 strings all playing the same note. Now that we've got a viable sample library, let's try to do some more research. As you can see, mandolins and mandriola come in a lot of different shapes. Originally, they all look pretty much like this with a rounded back, but then sometime in the late 19th century, someone in America invented this flatback style, and it took the world by storm. I've managed to find several instruments online that are similar to mine, but nothing that's an exact match. This one's fairly close. As you can see, there's a website called Mandolin Cafe, where people can exchange information about mandolins and related instruments. And yes, I already had an account on this site before I started work on this video. Anyway, I just posted some photos of my instrument, so hopefully someone can shed some light on this thing. In the meantime, I looked up Euphonica, the company that manufactured the strings that came with this. That company was based in Leipzig and specialized in unique mechanical music boxes. Quite an interesting company, but they definitely didn't make this mandolin. Anyway, I think it's finally time to change the strings on this thing and see how it affects the sound. I gotta make sure not to lose this bridge. I don't know where I could find another one like it that can accommodate so many strings. Next, I'm gonna take the tuners off so that I can really clean this thing. This is another part that I don't think I'd be able to replace very easily. Now that I've got the tuners free, I can grease them up. I use graphite lubricant because it doesn't leave any kind of residue. It's the same stuff that people use on bicycle chains. Oh, that makes a huge difference. Next, I repeat the process with the second set of tuners. Might as well take this opportunity to polish the instrument. Look how much dirt is coming off this. This was a clean rag when I started. Let's get those tuners back on. I'm eager to make this thing playable again. I'm using these lightweight D'Addario mandolin strings. I've used them before and I've always really liked the sound. Because this has 3 strings and not 2, I've had to buy 2 sets of strings. My plan is to do one set, G, D, A, E, and then do another pass and do the second set, and then another pass and do the third set. The strings attach these little pegs on the tailpiece. It's kind of weird because you end up with 3 strings on each peg. All in all, it takes me a lot longer than I would have thought to put on the strings. And that's just one of 3 sets. I wonder how it feels to play with just one set of strings. Oh, it's so much easier than when there were 3. I'm thinking now maybe I should just sample it with 1 string first. I have an idea for a cool experiment. So once again, I'm setting up a Reaper session, I'm hitting record, and I'm playing the same note over and over again. But this time, I'm only recording 1 string at a time. And I'm recording way more takes. Instead of 5 takes of each note, I'm recording 15. That way, each time a note is played, I can layer 3 different takes on top of each other. I'm essentially reconstructing the sound of the mandriola's 3 strings. Here's what the sample library looks like. Now here's where things get interesting. The reason mandolins and mandriolas have more than 1 string playing the same note is because it produces that beautiful shimmery chorus effect. That effect is actually produced by the strings being slightly out of tune with each other. With this sample library, because we recorded each of these strings separately, we're now free to mess with the tuning of the strings after the fact. That's what this pitch drift slider does. If I bring it all the way down, it almost sounds like we just have 1 string. As I turn it up, we start to hear that beautiful natural chorus effect. And we can actually take this 1 step further. This stereo control actually pans the 2nd and 3rd string, something we're not actually able to do on the real instrument. There's also a tremolo feature, which I just added so that we could get that classic mandolin sound. I almost never use this as intended. I usually just turn it down and use it as some sort of weird repeating delay. Okay, it's finally time to put the rest of the strings on this thing. All told, it took me about an hour to fully string up the instrument. Okay, I checked back on my post at Mandolin Cafe, and folks there are suggesting that it was probably made in the German region of Saxony, so I decided to look into that. Apparently, there's a small town in Saxony called Markneukirchen. By the way, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. Here's how Wikipedia says it's pronounced.
Markneukirchen.
Whoa. Well, there you have it. Anyway, this small town was the musical instrument manufacturing capital, not just of Germany, but of all of Europe. In fact, according to this article, by 1900, 80% of the world's musical instruments were made in this one town. Well, anyway, from 1880 to about 1945, there was this huge mandolin boom. There were these itinerant mandolin orchestras that would travel the world. People would go see performances, be swept off their feet by the romantic sounds that they heard, and then decide that they absolutely had to learn to play the instrument. Well, during this time, a huge number of unlabeled mandolins and mandriola were made in Saxony, both before and during communism. Companies all over the world would buy these instruments, slap their own labels on them, and sell them in their own regional markets. For example, this mandolin looks quite similar to mine. It has a label that says, sold by the International College of Music, London. But based on the way it looks, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was made in the same shop that made my mandriola. So I've now actually got all 12 strings on this instrument. I'm going to try playing something. I kind of like this. I feel like it's kind of like a psychedelic guitar riff. Somebody who's better at time signatures than me is going to have to figure out the actual time signature. I'm going to try adding drums. My father asked his older brother what he can remember about this instrument. He said my grandfather definitely purchased the instrument after the war, but that it was already used at the time. I suspect it was probably made in the 30s. My grandfather wasn't a serious musician, but apparently he had a couple tunes that he knew how to play, and on special occasions he would get it down off the wall and try to remember them, I guess. But otherwise it was basically a decorative object. In some small way, having this instrument in my studio brings me a bit closer to this relative I never knew. And I'm really glad that this instrument is getting a second life, both here in my studio and as a sample library that other people can use. Speaking of which, the libraries I made in this video are completely free. There's a link in the description to this video. If you enjoyed this video, now is a great time to subscribe to this channel. It's free, and if you click the bell icon, you will be notified the next time I post a video. Okay, I think that's it. See you soon.